My name is Natalie Harper, and I never thought the most humiliating moment of my professional life would be served cold by someone who shares my DNA. My older sister, Danielle. I work in corporate communications at Tarantech, a sleek, ultra-competitive tech firm in San Francisco. Glass walls, hushed conversations, espresso machines that cost more than my first car. It's the kind of place where image is everything. And I've spent the last 6 years building mine, piece by piece, from temp assistant to senior comms manager. I've worked late into the night more times than I can count. Skipped birthdays. Slept in the office more than once. I was never handed anything. Every promotion, every nod of approval, I earned through sheer will. And until recently, that had been enough. Then Danielle arrived. She's 5 years older. Smarter, according to our parents. Prettier, according to everyone else. She went to Yale. I went to UC Davis. She's always had this way of walking into a room and making people stop and notice. It's like she was born knowing how to shine. Our parents have always adored her. She was the type who got trophies for everything. I got "Why can't you be more like your sister?" It didn't matter what I accomplished, Danielle always loomed larger. When she got hired at Tarantech, I was cautiously optimistic. I figured, hey, maybe working together would help bridge the distance between us. I even helped her prep for the interview, coached her on the company culture, forwarded her articles about our CEO, gave her tips on the exec team's quirks. I should have known better. Danielle landed in the strategy division with a manager who worshipped her on site. She didn't waste time making herself known. Her voice echoed through meetings. Her laugh filled the lunchroom. And somehow, people started deferring to her like she'd been there for years. The first few weeks, I brushed off the little comments. Oh, Danielle's sister? She's so charismatic. Or, you two must be so competitive. Like I was lucky to share her last name. Like I was the tag-along. But things took a turn when I was tapped to lead the Q3 board presentation. It was a huge opportunity. Only a handful of managers ever get to present to the board directly. I'd been prepping for weeks, curating the messaging, coordinating with design, fine-tuning every word. I pulled 2 all-nighters to make sure every detail was perfect. The morning of the presentation, I was nervous but excited. I wore my best blazer, the navy one that makes me feel unstoppable. I got to the boardroom early, set everything up, took a few deep breaths. Then, click, click, click. Her heels. Danielle breezed in, her Louboutin pumps slicing the air like a warning shot. She was radiant, poised, and uninvited. I'm here to co-present, she said brightly, as if this had been planned all along. I blinked. Excuse me? Oh, didn't you hear? She said, brushing non-existent lint from her sleeve. Mark thought it'd be good to bring me in for support. You know, to give it more strategic framing. Mark was my department VP. I hadn't heard a word from him. I felt my stomach drop. Before I could argue, he walked in behind her and confirmed it, smiling like this was some brilliant collaboration. Thought it might be good synergy, he said. Synergy. Right. I couldn't breathe. I watched my own moment, the one I'd earned, being reshaped right in front of me. The presentation went forward. I did my part, polished, confident, but my voice felt hollow. When Danielle spoke, it was like watching a performance. She smiled at the board like she knew each member personally, referenced market trends she'd never mentioned in prep, and, here's the kicker, quoted lines from my strategy deck like she'd written them herself. And everyone ate it up. By the end, the board was nodding. Applauding. Our CEO clapped Danielle on the back and said, now that was a compelling vision. I felt invisible. Afterward, back at my desk, I stared blankly at my inbox as praise rolled in. But not for me. Not really. Amazing work, Danielle. Loved the strategic clarity. Natalie, great assist. Assist. That night, I sat at our kitchen island, still in my work clothes, telling my husband Aiden everything. My voice broke halfway through. I hadn't cried in years, but that night I did. I cried because it felt like everything I'd fought for had been snatched by someone who'd always had a shortcut. Aiden didn't speak right away. He just sat there, eyes fixed on mine, and listened. And then, after a long pause, he said something I'll never forget. I think it's time they knew exactly who you are, and who you're married to. I furrowed my brow, confused. What are you talking about? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the counter. They want polish? We'll give them power. That was the night Aiden decided to stop hiding. You see, my husband isn't just Aiden. He's Aiden Blackwell, the founder and majority shareholder of Blackwell Ventures. A quiet billionaire. Most people at my office have no idea. I've kept our worlds separate on purpose. But not anymore. It started with a simple email. Aiden, true to form, didn't announce anything grand. He forwarded me an invite he'd received, Terran Tech Executive Innovation Summit, private evening reception. It was an elite networking event our company hosted every year, reserved for C-suite leaders and major investors. Employees like me never got near it. But Aiden had just acquired a significant stake in Terran Tech's Series D funding round. Quietly. Strategically. And with that came a coveted invitation. He typed one line beneath the forwarded email, "Want to come as my plus one?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Was this really happening? That week at work, Danielle acted like she'd been crowned queen. She basked in the praise from the board presentation, dropping lines like, "When we reshaped the messaging," or "Natalie helped, of course." Like I'd been her assistant. I kept quiet. Not because I was scared, because I was waiting. The night of the reception arrived, and I slipped into a dress I hadn't worn in years. Emerald green, structured, elegant. It hugged my figure just right, made me feel like someone worth noticing. Aiden looked devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit. As he buttoned his jacket, he turned to me with that familiar calm and said, "You ready to have some fun?" I nodded. My stomach was tight with nerves, but not fear. Anticipation. The venue was pure opulence. Crystal chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. The room buzzed with quiet intensity, the kind only extreme wealth and power can generate. I recognized half a dozen top execs from my company before we even made it to the bar. And then I saw her. Danielle stood near the open terrace, laughing too loudly at something one of the VPs said. She was wearing that icy blue dress she saves for special occasions, the one that says, "I'm successful and effortlessly perfect." She hadn't seen me yet. "Let's walk in together," Aiden whispered, slipping his hand around my waist. The moment we stepped into the heart of the room, everything changed. It wasn't just the heads turning or the sudden hush. It was the moment the CFO of Terran Tech broke off from his conversation and made a beeline for us. "Aiden," he said, grinning like he'd just spotted royalty. "Didn't expect to see you tonight. Glad you could make it." Aiden shook his hand firmly, then gestured toward me. "You've met my wife, Natalie?" The CFO blinked. "Natalie Harper?" I smiled politely. "Nice to see you, Mr. Delaney." He looked stunned. "You work in communications, right?" "Yes. For the past 6 years." He looked between us again, something dawning in his eyes. And then, just like that, everything shifted. More execs drifted over. Names I'd only seen on org charts. They greeted Aiden like an old friend and me like I was someone they should have known all along. I felt eyes on me from across the room, and when I turned, I saw her. Danielle. She was frozen in place, her wineglass midair, eyes wide as if she'd seen a ghost. I offered her a small smile, the kind that says, "Oh, I didn't realize you were here too. And then I turned away. Aiden leaned in and whispered, "She's coming over." Sure enough, her heels clicked rapidly against the marble floor until she stood beside us, breathless. "Natalie," she said, voice tight. "What are you doing here?" I gave her a calm, amused look. "I'm here with my husband." Her eyes darted to Aiden, and for a split second, she looked like she might faint. "Your husband?" Her voice cracked. Aiden extended a hand, ever the gentleman. "Aiden Blackwell. It's nice to finally meet you, Danielle." Danielle's mouth opened, then closed. I watched the realization flood her face, the same face that had stolen my moment weeks ago. She suddenly understood what I'd let her believe, that I was small, unimportant, someone she could dismiss. But not tonight. "Wait," she said slowly, turning to me. "You're married to Aiden Blackwell?" "Yes." "But why didn't you ever say anything?" I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Why would I? You always said my accomplishments were too small to notice. Figured you weren't interested." Her jaw tightened, but before she could reply, the VP of Marketing approached. "Natalie," he said warmly, "we've been talking about your presentation last quarter. Incredible work. Would love to chat with you next week about some new initiatives." Danielle stood there, completely ignored, as I smiled and nodded, thanking him for the compliment. It was the first time I saw her truly speechless. And it felt incredible. After the reception, the story spread like wildfire. By Monday morning, I wasn't just Natalie from communications. I was Natalie Harper Blackwell, and suddenly, people remembered my name. People who hadn't looked twice at me in meetings were now CCing me on emails, looping me in on projects I'd been shut out of just weeks earlier. But not everyone was thrilled. Danielle, for one, avoided me like the plague. Gone was the smug strut, the smug voice, the subtle digs that always found a way to undermine me in front of others. Instead, she kept her distance, until she didn't. Wednesday afternoon, she cornered me in the break room. "You've been hiding him this whole time?" she hissed, her tone dripping with disbelief and something sharper, resentment. "What kind of game are you playing?" I didn't flinch. "It's not a game, Danielle. It's just my life. You never asked." She laughed, but it came out brittle. "So what, you let me think you were still struggling just to humiliate me?" "I didn't let you think anything," I replied calmly, pouring my tea. "You assumed. And you liked thinking I was beneath you." Her face twisted, and for a split second, I saw her mask drop, saw the insecurity hiding underneath all her polish. "You're not better than me," she said flatly. "No matter who your husband is." I met her gaze, steady. "I don't need to be better than you, Danielle. I just need to be me. That's enough." And then I walked out. But the fallout didn't end there. That Friday, my manager called me into his office. He seemed nervous, which was new. "I wanted to talk about your future here," he began, fiddling with his pen. "There's been some buzz." "Buzz?" I raised an eyebrow. He cleared his throat. "Senior leadership thinks you've shown great promise. They'd like to bring you into the executive mentorship track." My heart skipped. That program was practically a launchpad for the C-suite. Only a handful were ever selected. I nodded slowly, trying to stay composed. "Thank you. I'd love to be considered." Of course, of course." He smiled, relieved. "It's well deserved. And for what it's worth, I had no idea you were married to, well, you know." I smiled politely. "Aiden and I prefer to keep things separate. But I'm glad my work is finally speaking for itself." After the meeting, I stood by the elevator, stunned. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged. I knew I did. But of course, the whispering started. Some said I was only getting opportunities now because of my husband. Others said I had played the long game brilliantly, that I'd fooled everyone. The truth? I didn't care anymore. Because I knew what they didn't, I had been doing this work all along. My name just carried more weight now. The irony wasn't lost on me. One evening, I was heading out late when I found Danielle at her desk, staring blankly at her screen. The office was quiet. She looked tired. Defeated. "Danielle," I said gently. She looked up, startled. "I meant what I said," I continued. "I didn't do this to hurt you." She said nothing for a moment, then looked away. "You didn't have to. I did it to myself." I left her there, unsure of what would come next between us. There was no tidy resolution. No sudden closeness. Just a quiet understanding that everything had changed. Because this time, I didn't shrink. I didn't let someone else define my worth. And it felt like I was finally breathing again. The following weeks were a strange mix of vindication and unease. For the first time, I was being invited to leadership roundtables, asked for input on strategy memos, even approached about potentially speaking at a Women in Tech panel. It was everything I had wanted for years, except now, I couldn't shake the feeling that people were seeing Aidan's shadow instead of my light. One afternoon, I came home to find him on the patio, his laptop open and a familiar intensity in his gaze. "You okay?" I asked, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "Yeah," he said, glancing up with a smile. "But I've been thinking." That's always a loaded phrase coming from Aidan. Thinking about. He closed the laptop. About you. About how Tarantech doesn't deserve you. I blinked. "Okay, that's a bit dramatic." He chuckled. "Not really. You're underappreciated. Always have been. And now that they know who you're married to, they're reacting, not because they suddenly saw your talent, but because they realized you come with leverage." I leaned against the railing, arms crossed. "I know. But I don't want to walk away just because they didn't see it sooner." "I'm not saying walk away. I'm saying own it. Use it." He was right. And it terrified me. That Friday, I presented a communications overhaul plan to the senior leadership team. Danielle was in the room, seated near the back, her posture tight. As I spoke, something in me clicked into place. I wasn't just delivering ideas, I was leading. Commanding. At one point, the CTO leaned forward and said, "Natalie, why haven't we heard more from you before?" I smiled, steady and measured. "Maybe you were listening to the wrong voices." A beat passed, and then the room erupted into low chuckles and approving nods. Even Danielle cracked a faint smile, tight-lipped but real. Afterward, she caught up with me by the elevators. "You were good," she said, eyes still guarded. "Like, really good." I hesitated, then said, "Thanks. That means something." She bit her lip, like she had more to say. But the elevator dinged, and the moment passed. That weekend, Aidan surprised me. "I want to fund something," he said, as we sat in our kitchen, sipping wine. "Something yours." I laughed. "You mean besides the roof over our heads?" "No," he said seriously. "I mean a foundation. Or a startup. Or a think tank. Whatever you want. Something you lead." The idea knocked the wind out of me. I'd spent so long fighting to be noticed in someone else's world. The thought of creating my own? "I don't know what I'd even build," I whispered. "You don't have to know yet," he said. "You just have to believe that you can." That night, I lay awake in bed, the city lights flickering through the blinds, and realized something: this wasn't just about my sister anymore. It wasn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It was about stepping into my own power on my own terms. The idea Aiden planted didn't let go. For the next few days, it haunted me, in a good way. I found myself scribbling notes in the margins of meeting agendas, texting myself ideas mid-commute, even waking up at 2 a.m. with sentences tumbling out of me like I'd been bottling them for years. I realized I didn't just want to lead inside someone else's organization, I wanted to create something that mattered. Something that would help women like me. Women who were overlooked, underestimated, or quietly carrying the weight of teams without the title or recognition. I wanted to build a platform, part mentorship, part media, part funding hub, where women in business could grow, share their stories, and get access to real opportunities without needing a spotlight to be taken seriously. I pitched it to Aiden over dinner, my voice trembling even though I knew he'd support me. He listened intently, nodding slowly. "You're not thinking small." "I like it." That night, we started sketching out the blueprint. I called it Echo Rise, a name that felt strong and reverberant, like the impact I wanted it to have. But even as Echo Rise took shape, the atmosphere at work shifted. Danielle's behavior changed again. She wasn't cold anymore, but she wasn't quite warm either. We were suspended in this weird sibling ceasefire, where she'd nod in the hallway, maybe even drop a compliment in a meeting, but kept a careful distance. Then one day, she booked time on my calendar. It was just 30 minutes. The invite said, "Quick sync." I braced myself. We met in a small glass-walled conference room. She walked in with a coffee for me, black with one sugar, just how I liked it. She sat down and fidgeted with the lid of her own. "I owe you an apology," she said before I could even speak. My eyebrows shot up. "For the presentation." "For all of it." I leaned back in my chair, stunned into silence. "I think I let the competition get to me," she said, not looking at me. "When I saw you getting noticed, really noticed, I panicked. Because suddenly I wasn't the one in control." I studied her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't groveling. Just honest. A little raw. "I let my insecurity take over," she added. "And I'm sorry." There was a long pause. I nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." It didn't erase everything, but it mattered. We talked for a few more minutes, about work, about family, about how our parents still treated her like the heir apparent and me like the kid with potential. When the meeting ended, something between us had shifted. Maybe not healed completely, but cracked open, enough for light to get in. A few weeks later, I submitted my resignation to Tarantech. It was quiet. No press release. No big party. Just a handshake from my VP, a few surprised glances from colleagues, and a longer-than-expected hug from Danielle. As I packed up my things, she said, "You're really doing it, huh?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Time to build something of my own." And this time, no one could steal it. Launching Echo Rise was the most terrifying and exhilarating thing I'd ever done. I started small, just a website with a mission statement, a few blog posts, and a simple logo Aiden helped me design. I sent out emails to my old contacts, posted about it on LinkedIn, and waited. Within a week, my inbox was full. Messages from women all over, junior analysts, seasoned project managers, even a few execs, sharing stories of being passed over, silenced, underestimated. They didn't just want resources. They wanted community. They wanted to be seen. I built a newsletter. Held my first virtual roundtable. Then a second. By month 2, we had a Slack group with over 400 members from 10 different countries. By month 3, we had our first sponsor. And by month 4, Forbes called. They wanted to do a spotlight on Echo Rise as part of their Women Rewriting Business series. I remember sitting in the interview, the reporter leaning in and asking, "How did this all start?" I smiled, remembering everything that had led to this, Danielle, the boardroom, the humiliation, the truth. Someone tried to steal my moment, I said. So I built my own stage. That quote ended up as the article's headline. Echo Rise took off after that. We added mentorship programs, curated leadership coaching, even launched a microgrant initiative for women starting their own businesses. Aiden helped me navigate the logistics, but he stayed out of the spotlight. This was my venture, and he knew it. And I was finally thriving. Not just professionally. Personally, too. Danielle surprised me one day by asking if she could contribute a piece to the Echo Rise blog. I've been thinking about how we, as women, sometimes sabotage each other, she said, her voice quiet. I want to be honest about that. The piece was raw, thoughtful, and it resonated. She shared her experience with insecurity, with the pressure of perfection, and with watching her sister surpass her and not knowing how to handle it. She signed off with, "If you're reading this, Natalie, thank you for forgiving me before I forgave myself." I cried when I read it. Aiden read it too. That's growth, he said simply. And it was. Our family dynamic didn't magically transform, but it got lighter. More real. Danielle and I started meeting up outside of work, coffee on Saturdays, long walks with no agenda. We were rebuilding something from scratch. And this time, it wasn't built on comparison. It was built on respect. But one final twist was still coming, something I didn't see coming. Something that would test everything I'd built and reveal just how far I'd come. It was a crisp fall morning when I received the invitation that caught me off guard. Tarrantech was launching a new women's leadership initiative, and they wanted me as the keynote speaker. I read the email twice, stunned. The same company that once let my sister co-opt my moment, now wanted me to open their most high-profile internal campaign of the year. The irony was poetic. But more than that, it felt right. Aiden found me staring at my laptop. "You okay?" I turned to him, grinning. "They want me back." "Of course they do," he said, not missing a beat. "You've built something they can't ignore." The night of the event arrived quickly. I wore a sleek black suit, sharp, confident, completely me. I walked into the same auditorium where I'd once stood on the sidelines, watching others claim my credit. This time, I stepped onto the stage alone, no sister in sight, no shadow looming over me. The room quieted. And I told them the truth. I talked about being underestimated. About being talked over, dismissed, discredited. I talked about the time someone I trusted took something that wasn't hers. But I also talked about what came after. I didn't build Echo Rise because I wanted revenge, I told the crowd. I built it because I got tired of waiting for permission to be seen. And I wanted other women to stop waiting, too. There was silence at first, then thunderous applause. As I walked off stage, a familiar figure was waiting near the exit. Danielle. She looked proud. And a little emotional. "You are incredible," she said, hugging me. "Thank you," I whispered. And I meant it. After the event, a young woman approached me. She looked maybe 24, nervous but determined. "I've been following Echo Rise," she said. "Your story made me believe I could start something, too." I smiled. "That's why I tell it." And that's when it hit me, this wasn't about outshining anyone. It wasn't about proving I was better than Danielle, or smarter, or stronger. It was about choosing myself, even when no one else did. It was about becoming the woman I needed to be, so that other women could see they could be her, too. Because when you stop shrinking, you give others permission to rise. And that, finally, was everything.